At a quiet suburban high school, a new black girl tries to fit in and stay out of trouble. But peace ends when a white boy, the school's football team captain, pours sauce over her head in the cafeteria. Everyone laughs at her. No teacher speaks up. No one helps. Her fists clench so tight that blood drips from her palms. What no one knows is that she used to be a state MMA champion, trained by a Marine, and they're about to pay a very heavy price for their foolish actions. The bus hissed to a stop in front of Riverstone High, its brakes squealing in the cold morning air. Amara Johnson sat silently by the window, her fingers pressed into the strap of her backpack. She waited until most of the students had filed out before standing. The hallway of the bus was narrow, and the faces passing by didn't glance her way. That was fine. That was what she wanted. She stepped down onto the pavement, pulling the hood of her gray sweatshirt a little lower over her head. The building loomed ahead, all red brick and narrow windows typical of small-town schools. The name Riverstone High was etched above the main entrance in proud, faded letters. Her sneakers made soft thuds on the concrete as she walked. Behind her, the bus pulled away, leaving a faint trail of exhaust and the low murmur of students talking about homecoming football and whatever else mattered here. None of it mattered to her. Not yet. Amara was 16. Petite, brown-skinned with full lips and a sharp jawline that gave her face a strength most people didn't expect. Her hair, thick natural coils, was gathered into a low bun. She wore plain jeans, a washed-out hoodie, and a battered black backpack. To most, she was invisible. She counted on that. But invisibility doesn't always keep you safe. Sometimes it makes you a target. The moment she stepped through the front doors, the building seemed to pause. Not completely. There were still footsteps, lockers slamming, and distant chatter, but something shifted. Not in the world, in her. She could feel every eye that glanced her way. The curious looks, the sideways glances, not hostile, not yet, just watching, judging. She walked toward the main office, clutching the folded schedule in her hand. Her heart beat a little faster, but her face showed nothing. That was the first rule she'd learned back in Baltimore. Never let them see you sweat. Inside the office, a secretary looked up, middle-aged, pale-skinned, with glasses resting at the tip of her nose. She gave Amara the kind of tight-lipped smile that wasn't quite warm, but wasn't rude either. "You must be Amara," the woman said. "Yes, ma'am. Welcome to Riverstone High." She handed Amara a printed schedule. "You're in homeroom 12B with Mr. Danning. You'll find it down the left hallway, past the science wing." Amara nodded and whispered thank you before turning to leave. As she walked through the hall, she kept her eyes low. Not submissive, just strategic. She didn't need attention. She didn't want it. But in places like Riverstone, silence isn't safety. Silence is suspicion. The hallway was lined with groups of students in clusters, laughing, gossiping, texting. She passed by, slowly, her head down, pretending not to notice the way their conversations dipped as she walked by. "Who's that?" someone muttered. "New girl. Black girl. Quiet. She from the city or something?" It was always the same. She had been through this before 3 times in 3 different schools. Baltimore, Dayton, now here. Every time she stepped into a new hallway, the same pattern played out. And every time she reminded herself of what her mother had said. "Blend in, Amara. Just get through it. No drama, no attention. You're not here to prove anything." But in these places, being a quiet black girl wasn't the safe route. It was the exposed one. At her locker, Amara took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside was nothing but a clean metal shelf and the scent of fresh paint. She set her bag down, carefully organizing her books, one hand gripping the spine of each with care. Her fingers trembled just slightly, not from nerves, but from restraint. Always restraint. She glanced down the hall. No one had approached. No, "Hey, are you new?" No need help finding class, just distance, controlled indifference. And then it started. Not loud, not cruel. Just a group of girls passing behind her, laughing a little too hard. One of them, a brunette with cheerleader energy, whispered something to her friend, who looked back at Amara and smirked. Amara didn't turn. She didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. By second period, the whispers followed her like smoke. "Who's the new girl? I think she's from the city. She doesn't talk much. Why is she always looking down? In American high schools, silence is loud. People notice who isn't trying to fit in." In the lunchroom, Amara sat alone. Not because she wanted to, though she'd convinced herself that was the case, but because there was no space for someone like her at any other table. She picked a spot near the windows back against the wall, always facing the room. A habit, not paranoia, just awareness. As she unwrapped her sandwich, she caught a group of boys 2 tables away nudging each other and glancing her way. One of them made a hand gesture mimicking a boxing jab. They laughed. Her shoulders stiffened, but she kept her gaze steady. Didn't show reaction. Not yet. Sometimes the worst kind of bullying doesn't come with punches. It comes with stares, with laughter that's just low enough not to be called out, with silence that makes you question if you're really imagining things. And for Amara, it wasn't just about being the new kid. It was about being different in a place that clearly wasn't used to difference. The only other black student she'd seen all day was in the hallway between periods, and even he had looked at her like she was interrupting a rhythm he'd already gotten used to surviving in. By the time the final bell rang, Amara had said less than a dozen words to anyone who wasn't a teacher. She moved through the day like a shadow, unnoticed by most, targeted by a few, and completely alone. But she was used to that. She walked home alone, her hoodie pulled over her head despite the mild weather. The streets of Riverstone were quiet, clean, neatly lined with trimmed hedges and American flags. Houses looked the same, white siding porches with rocking chairs, picket fences that never seemed to need repainting. Baltimore had been louder, rougher, more real in some ways, but also more honest. People didn't pretend they liked you when they didn't. There were no games, just truth, sometimes brutal. In Riverstone, everything was hidden behind politeness, behind fake smiles and careful distance. Amara stepped into the house, dropped her bag near the door, and headed to the kitchen. Her mother, Yolanda Johnson, was already there, still in her scrubs, chopping vegetables with slow precision. How was it? Yolanda asked without turning. Fine, Amara replied. A beat, then softer quiet. Yolanda turned and looked at her daughter's eyes, narrowing slightly. She knew that look. The way Amara's mouth tightened just a little too long. The way she stood with her shoulders not quite relaxed. You okay? Yeah. Another pause. A silent conversation passed between them, a language built from years of moving, of surviving, of reading rooms faster than speaking words. Yolanda nodded slowly and went back to the vegetables. If anything happens, you tell me. Don't carry it alone. I know. And she did. But she also knew her mother had enough on her plate. A new job at the Riverstone Medical Center, a new mortgage, a new neighborhood filled with neighbors who smiled too wide but didn't wave when they passed. That night, Amara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her earbuds playing low music just to drown out the silence. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since she was 12. Not since that day outside a school in Memphis when 2 older boys had cornered her after class and thought they could teach her what being quiet meant. That was before she started training. Now she didn't cry. She calculated. She observed. She endured. She didn't come to Riverstone to make trouble. She didn't come to stand out. She wanted peace. But peace, she was starting to realize, wasn't always something you found. Sometimes it was something you had to make. And the way today had gone, the way people looked at her like she didn't belong, like her silence meant weakness, Amara knew something else too. They were watching her. And soon, someone was going to test her. They always did. She closed her eyes and exhaled slowly, letting the tension bleed out of her muscles one breath at a time. Her hands still resting on the blanket were calm, but the space between her ribs ached with pressure. A storm gathering. Riverstone didn't know her yet, but they would. Tuesday started like Monday, ended quiet, unnoticed. Amara moved through the first few periods with her usual caution, eyes forward, words, measured steps intentional. She had learned a long time ago that silence could be a kind of shield, but it was a thin one, easily cracked. By the time lunch arrived, the cafeteria at Riverstone High was loud, bright, and divided. Tables weren't just places to eat. They were invisible fences. The athletes sat near the windows, their voices echoing across the space. The drama club stuck to the corner by the vending machines. The quiet kids hovered near the exit. Everyone knew where they belonged. Amara sat alone again. Same corner table near the far wall. She liked it there. It was close to the back exit, and nobody paid attention. Or at least they didn't until now. She peeled back the crust of her sandwich slowly, pretending not to notice the group of boys walking toward her table. Chase Weller led the pack. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with shaggy blonde hair and the easy swagger of someone who had never been told no and actually meant it. His varsity jacket hung open over a tight t-shirt, jeans sitting low on his hips like every moment of his presence was carefully styled. He wasn't alone. 2 boys flanked him like loyal dogs. Eli, shorter with twitchy hands and a constant smirk, and Brett, tall, quiet, and probably stronger than he looked. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Chase did the talking. Yo Chase called out as he neared Amara's table. "New girl." "Well, well," he said loudly. "City girl sits alone. Again." Amara didn't respond. Chase pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, spreading his legs wide, taking up more space than necessary. "You know," he continued, "most people make friends by the second day. You trying to break some kind of record?" She looked up slowly. Her eyes didn't waver, but her fingers were clenched under the table. "I'm just eating," she said. "You're just eating?" he repeated, then laughed. "Come on, Amara. You really think you can sit here every day and not play by the rules?" She blinked once quietly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Chase leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "There's a system here," he said. "Riverstone High isn't like Baltimore. It runs smooth. Everyone knows where they stand, what's expected. You don't cause trouble, and you get by just fine." His voice was calm, even friendly on the surface, but there was steel underneath, and Amara heard it. $10 a day, he said casually. "Keeps things smooth, safe, friendly." Amara blinked. Just once. "I'm sorry," she said, not because she hadn't heard, but because she wanted to be sure she understood the rules of the game before deciding whether to play. Chase straightened, pacing a slow step to the side. His voice dropped to a low hum, like he was sharing something just between them. "You're new." "I get it. Probably a little overwhelmed. Don't worry, though. This place can be intense. But you got me looking out for you. You'll be fine." Behind him, Connor laughed out loud, nudging Dylan. Amara knew the laugh wasn't for a joke, it was for the show. That was the real game here. The performance. The way Chase turned humiliation into entertainment. People were watching now. Not everyone, but enough. Heads turned subtly, pretending not to look. A few phones even came out, half-hidden screens tilted up. Amara felt her face heat, but not from shame. From fury. She tightened her grip on the edge of her tray, her knuckles pale. "Let me guess," she said, voice low. "Your dad donates a lot to the school." Chase grinned wider. "Now you're catching on." She shook her head slowly. "So you think you can do whatever you want?" "No," he said. "I know I can." That line echoed in her ears like a gunshot. There was no fear in his voice, no doubt, only certainty. Because the worst part wasn't that he said it. The worst part was he was probably right. Because Chase Weller was Riverstone royalty. His father was a big-shot contractor who helped fund the new gym, the new football field, and donated to the Booster Club every season. Chase's jersey was framed in the principal's office. He was practically untouchable. Amara took a breath and looked away. "I'm not paying you anything." Chase's face twitched. Just for a second, the cafeteria seemed to grow quieter, like the room itself was waiting. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound. "I was trying to be nice," he said. "Give you the soft intro." He stood, grabbed her tray with both hands, and flipped it. The sandwich apple and milk slid across the table and into her lap. "Oh no," he said mockingly. "What a mess." Connor howled with laughter. Dylan chuckled nervously. Around the cafeteria, some kids gasped. Others giggled. A few lifted their phones higher. Amara sat still. Her jeans were soaked. The milk dripped down her thighs, pooling under the bench. Food splattered across her hoodie. Chase leaned over her again. "Tomorrow it's 20, he whispered. Then he walked away. The laughter followed him. Amara didn't move. She didn't blink. Her mind was blank for a moment, frozen by the cold sensation of milk and the burn of humiliation. Then very slowly her fingers unclenched. She stood up. Each step toward the exit left a wet print on the floor. She didn't look at anyone. Not at the girl who covered her mouth in shock. Not at the boy who laughed too loudly. Not at the teacher standing near the hallway door who had seen everything but chose to turn away. That last one hurt the most. The silence of adults. The quiet that spoke volumes. In the girls' bathroom, Amara peeled off her hoodie and stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection was soaked, humiliated, and trembling. But not from fear. She ran the faucet, tried to wash the milk off her hands, but they kept shaking. "This isn't new," she told herself. "You've seen worse." But it didn't help, because no matter how many times it happens, being singled out like that, laughed at, degraded, it still stings. She grabbed a handful of paper towels and pressed them to her clothes, but the damage was done. The humiliation lingered on her skin like something she couldn't scrub off, and the worst part was, she'd known this was coming. She had seen it in his eyes yesterday. The warning signs were all there. This wasn't about money. Not really. It was about control. about reminding her that this school wasn't her space, that it belonged to him, that someone like her, Black Quiet, knew wasn't supposed to stand on equal ground. In towns like Riverstone, there were rules, but they weren't written down, and the people who followed them weren't always good people. Amara's hands curled into fists again. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from restraint. She could have knocked him flat in that cafeteria. She could have shattered the smugness off his face in one move. But she didn't, because her mother had asked her not to, because she was trying to be better, because she thought maybe, just maybe, if she stayed quiet, it would pass. It hadn't, and it wouldn't, not until someone made it stop. She looked at her reflection again. Her eyes were steady now. No more shaking, no more questions, just a decision. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about her pride anymore. It was about not letting this place swallow her whole, not letting the silence win. Because silence is what people like Chase count on. And for far too long, people had been silent. But Amara wasn't just another girl anymore, not after today. Tomorrow would be different. Amara sat at the kitchen table, her hoodie balled up beside her, still damp from the milk. She stared at the surface of the table, at the small chip in the wood near the edge. Her fork pushed through the mashed potatoes on her plate, but she hadn't taken a bite. Across the room, her mother stirred a pot on the stove. The smell of seasoned greens filled the air, but it didn't calm Amara the way it used to. Not tonight. Darlene Johnson glanced over her shoulder, concern etched in the lines under her eyes. "You hardly touched your food." Amara gave a quiet shrug. "Not that hungry." Her mother turned off the burner and wiped her hands on a towel. She walked over and sat across from her daughter, folding her arms on the table. "I can tell when something's wrong, Amara. Talk to me." Amara hesitated. Her eyes drifted to the living room, then back to her mother. "Some boys at school. One of them flipped my lunch tray on me." Darlene's face stiffened. On purpose, Amara nodded. "Did you tell someone? What would that change?" She replied, her voice flat. There was a long pause between them. The kitchen, warm and familiar, now felt like a room full of silence pressing down on their shoulders. "You didn't hit him, did you?" her mother asked carefully. "No." A breath of relief escaped from Darlene's lips. "I wanted to," Amara added, "more than anything." Her mother sat back, her eyes softening with something heavier than worry history. "That's not who you are anymore," she said quietly. Amara didn't answer right away. Her hand drifted to a scar just below her elbow, an old one, faded, but still there. She rubbed it without thinking. "Maybe it still is," she whispered. Darlene leaned forward. "We left all of that behind, baby. You said you wanted a fresh start. I need you to remember why we're here." "I remember," Amara said, "but he humiliated me, in front of everyone. They laughed Mama, like it was normal. Because in places like this, her mother said, people will laugh at anything that makes them feel powerful, even if it's wrong. Especially if it's wrong." Amara stared at her hands. They were still trembling slightly, not from fear, but restraint. Darlene reached across the table and took her hand. "You promised me, Amara. I know. No fights, no showing off, no making them afraid of you. I know." Amara's jaw tightened. She didn't want to be seen as dangerous. She didn't want to be feared. That wasn't the life she wanted anymore. But pretending to be something she wasn't, weak, passive, invisible, that wasn't working either. That night, when her mother went to work the night shift at the hospital, Amara went up to her room. She didn't turn on the lights. She sat on the edge of her bed and opened the small box beneath it. Inside were pieces of a past she wasn't supposed to touch. A pair of worn MMA gloves, a faded red headband with sweat stains, old photos, one of her standing on a podium holding a gold medal, her right eye bruised but smiling wide, another of her Uncle Calvin beside her in full marine dress uniform, arms crossed proudly. She picked up the gloves. Her fingers slipped into them easily, like muscle memory had never left. She closed her eyes and the sounds came back. The slam of fists on canvas, the bark of her coach's voice, the sweat, the heat, the pain, and the control. Uncle Calvin had started training her when she was 10 after she came home from school with a black eye and a swollen lip. She never said who had done it, but he didn't need to ask. He'd seen that kind of hurt before. He took her to the gym the next day. "No one's gonna fight for you," he told her, "so you need to learn how to fight smart." He taught her how to breathe through her anger, how to throw a punch without losing control, how to lose with dignity and win without cruelty. By 13, she was competing in regional matches. By 14, she had beaten opponents 2 weight classes above her. By 15, she was the Maryland State Junior Champion. But that title didn't come without cost. She remembered one match, her final bout before they moved. She had dropped her opponent with a clean liver shot, and the girl didn't get up. The crowd had cheered, but the look on her opponent's face, the fear, the pain that haunted her. Even worse were the looks afterward, not from her rivals, but from the people in the stands, from the parents, from the officials. They didn't see a skilled athlete. They saw a threat, a strong black girl, too good, too fast, too dangerous. "Is that your daughter?" she overheard one woman ask her mom after a tournament. "She's intense." "Too intense," another whispered. "Someone's gonna get hurt one day." Amara had spent months trying to shake that image. She wasn't a monster. She didn't fight out of anger. But she started to feel like she couldn't win without losing something. That's when her mother asked her to stop. When the job offer at the hospital in Riverstone came up, it felt like a way out. A quiet town, good schools. No one has to know, Darlene had said. You can just be a normal kid again. And Amara had nodded. She wanted that. She really did. But sitting there now with the gloves in her lap and the sting of Chase Weller's voice still fresh in her ears, she wasn't sure anymore. What good was hiding who she was if it meant letting people like Chase walk all over her? What good was staying quiet if silence meant surrender? She took out her phone. The screen glowed in the dark. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the one name she hadn't touched in months, Uncle Calvin. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She didn't press it. Not yet. But her breathing slowed. Her heart steadied. The gloves were still on her hands, and she wasn't ready to take them off. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what kind of person she wanted to be in this new town, and whether she could live with herself if she kept letting people decide her worth for her. She slid the gloves back into the box, but she didn't close it. Not this time. Downstairs, the house creaked. A pipe moaned in the wall. The clock ticked softly. Amara lay back on her bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would go back to school. She would sit in the same seat in the same cafeteria. She would look Chase Weller in the eye. And if he tried again, she didn't know what she would do. But one thing was certain. The part of her she had buried, it wasn't dead. It was just waiting. Friday afternoon. The cafeteria was at full volume, laughter echoing, trays clattering, sneakers squeaking across the linoleum. It was pizza day, which meant the line was long, and students were more restless than usual. Amara Johnson had learned to get there early, grab whatever looked decent, and take her spot in the back corner where no one cared to sit. She didn't eat to socialize. She ate to survive the next few hours. She picked at her food mechanically, chewing slowly, eyes scanning the room in short, careful glances. Every now and then, she would pause, her jaw tightening, listening. She could feel it again. That shift in the room's energy, that hush before a storm. Chase Weller was coming. She didn't need to look. She could tell by the way people started watching her table, not subtly anymore. They didn't bother pretending they weren't waiting for something to happen. Phones were already being unlocked. Smiles were spreading. A few whispers bounced between tables. Round two. She set her fork down slowly. Chase walked in through the double doors like he always did, with confidence that didn't ask for space, it demanded it. Varsity jacket hair, perfectly tousled grin painted across his face like a victory banner. He spotted her instantly. Last time she had walked away. No response. No pushback. He didn't like that. Chase thrived on reactions, on control. So this time, he came to break her in front of everyone. He walked directly to her table this time with no posse flanking him. He didn't need an entourage today. The crowd was already gathered. Amara didn't move. He grabbed an empty chair and spun it around, straddling it backwards, arms resting over the backrest as he leaned in. "Missed you this morning," he said, with that same mocking tone. "What happened? You forget your protection money." Amara looked up at him, calm. No fear in her eyes, only quiet defiance. "I'm not paying you." Chase chuckled. "That's what I thought. See, the thing is, when you don't pay your part, you make people think they don't have to either. That's bad for business." He glanced to the right. One of the football players at a nearby table nodded, then tossed him a large cup. Chase caught it and stared at it a moment before holding it up for Amara to see. It was full of barbecue sauce, thick, warm, still steaming from the kitchen. She blinked once. "I'm warning you," she said softly. He laughed. "Warning me," he said, raising his eyebrows. "What are you gonna do? Write a poem about it?" He stood, walked around the table, and hovered behind her. People had started recording. One girl near the soda machine had already angled her phone up, camera rolling. Another boy across the room grinned like he was at a boxing match. Chase tilted the cup forward. Amara could feel the heat near her scalp. She clenched her fists under the table, and then he poured it. Barbecue sauce soaked her hair, dripped down her face, her shoulders, her back. It clung to her skin, thick and sticky, staining her gray hoodie, a deep brown red. The cafeteria erupted. Laughter, phones, applause from some tables. Someone shouted, "Sauce her again." Weller Amara sat frozen. Her jaw tightened. Her nostrils flared, but she didn't cry. She stood up, slowly, with control. Barbecue sauce dripped from her braids to the floor, spattering onto her sneakers. Chase smirked. What he asked, hands out like he was innocent. "Too spicy for you." No teacher moved. No aide stepped forward. The adults nearby turned away, pretending not to see, or maybe too afraid to deal with the school's golden boy. That hurt more than anything else, because in schools like this, if you're black and quiet, people don't ask what happened. They ask what you did. Amara looked around at the faces watching her. Some were laughing. Some looked away. But none of them stood up. Her breathing was shallow, tight. Inside her head, the sound of her uncle's voice rose again. "Amara, real strength ain't about how hard you hit. It's about when you decide to hit it all." She clenched her hands so tightly her nails dug into her palms, and one by one, small drops of blood formed along her knuckles. She didn't look at Chase again, didn't give him the satisfaction. She turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted as she passed, still laughing, still whispering. Someone muttered "saucy girl" under their breath and snickered. Someone else called out, "You gonna cry now?" She didn't answer, didn't flinch, but each step felt like fire because she had stayed silent. She had honored her mother's wish. She had swallowed the first insult. And this was her reward. Not peace, not safety, but escalation. A second public humiliation. Because she refused to play by the unspoken rules. Because she didn't fall in line. Because she had the nerve to say no and walk away. She reached the girls' bathroom, locked the door behind her, and leaned over the sink. Her reflection stared back, face streaked in red-brown sauce. Her hoodie soaked her pride, torn in half. She grabbed a paper towel and began wiping her face. The towel came away stained, then another, and another. But it wouldn't come off. Not all of it. And no matter how hard she scrubbed, she couldn't scrub away the sound of their laughter. She let the towel drop into the sink and braced herself on the counter. Her arms trembled. She lowered her head and closed her eyes. And she remembered the first time she fought back. Back in Baltimore, in that dingy gym with the peeling walls and no air conditioning. She had just turned 12, and a boy 2 years older had called her stupid ghetto trash during sparring. She had said nothing. But when the round started, she dropped him in 8 seconds flat. Her uncle didn't clap. He didn't smile. He waited until they got home before he said anything. "You don't have to prove you're strong, Amara. You just have to know it." She had remembered that for years, had carried it with her through every fight, every tournament, every confrontation. But now it didn't feel like enough, because knowing she was strong hadn't stopped Chase. Being quiet hadn't spared her dignity. Respecting the rules hadn't protected her body. She looked at her hands, her knuckles still red, her fingers trembling. She had a choice. She could keep being quiet, keep taking it, keep hoping someone else would step in, or she could stop hoping and start deciding. The next time Chase Weller came for her, she wouldn't walk away. Not again. The hallway was nearly empty when the last bell rang. Lockers slammed shut. Footsteps faded. Laughter trailed off down the main corridor as most of the students hurried toward freedom and Friday night plans. But Amara didn't leave. She stood in front of her locker, motionless, her fingers gripping the cold metal handle. Her hoodie was still stained with faint blotches from the barbecue sauce, even though she'd scrubbed it twice the night before. She hadn't changed it on purpose. Let them see what they did. Let them remember. She waited, and at exactly 4 o'clock she turned and walked through the West Wing exit, stepping into the back parking lot. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. Only a few staff cars remained. The lot was quiet, calm. Amara stood still, her arms folded, watching the gym doors. 3 minutes passed. Then they opened. Chase Weller stepped outside, spinning his keys in one hand. His duffel bag hung from his shoulder, and his varsity jacket caught the sun like armor. He squinted when he saw her, his smile rising slowly like a dare. "Well," he said, walking toward her, "look who waited for me." Amara didn't move. Her expression didn't shift. She just watched him approach, watched the way he looked at her like she was part of some joke only he found funny. "Here to cry?" he asked, stopping a few feet away. "Or you want to thank me for making you famous? Last night's video already hit 2,000 views. They're calling you Rib Sauce Girl now." Amara took a slow breath, steadying herself. "I didn't come to talk," she said. Chase tilted his head. "No, I came to end this." He laughed. "End it? Oh, sweetheart, this is just getting started." Amara stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Her voice was calm, measured. "You want to prove something? Fine. Let's settle it right here." Chase blinked, thrown off for a second. "Settle what? You and me. One-on-one. No crowd, no cameras. You win. I pay your little fee every day without complaint. I'll sit where you want. Say what you want. Stay out of your way forever." He grinned. "And if you win—" "You leave me alone," she said. "You apologize." In front of everyone. The wind shifted. A flag somewhere near the field snapped against its pole. Chase stared at her for a long second. Then he burst out laughing. "You want to fight me?" he said, almost doubling over. "Are you serious?" Amara didn't blink. "I'm dead serious. You think you can beat me?" He scoffed. "I've been playing football since I was 10. I bench 300 pounds. I've knocked guys twice your size on their backs with one hit." Amara shrugged. "Then you've got nothing to be afraid of." That line made him pause. He looked her up and down, small frame, steady eyes, a posture that didn't match her size. He squinted. There was something he hadn't seen before, something new. Still, he smirked. "Fine," he said. "You want a little scrap? Let's do it. No teachers, no cameras, just us. But don't cry when it's over." "No crying," Amara said. "No rules, but no real damage." We both walk away standing. Chase rolled his shoulders and dropped his duffel bag. "Where do you want to do this?" he asked. Amara nodded toward the row of faculty parking spots. "Over there, away from the building." He followed her. His footsteps were heavy, sure of themselves. She walked ahead, quiet, her heart pounding not from fear, but focus. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about proving something to Chase, or the kids who laughed, or the teachers who looked the other way. This was about reclaiming herself. This was about dignity, about choice, about showing that when the world refused to protect you, you still had the right to protect yourself. They stopped in the center of an empty space. No cars, no lights, just asphalt and long shadows. Amara turned to face him. Chase dropped his jacket, cracking his knuckles. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. Amara nodded once. "I'm done being quiet." He grinned. "Well then," he said, "let's dance." But Amara didn't move. Not yet, because this wasn't about attacking first. This was about control. And for the first time since she walked into Riverstone High, she was the one in control. The game had begun, and this time it was on her terms. The crowd had gathered without an official announcement. Word spread faster than any morning memo or school intercom ever could. Chase Weller, the golden boy, the captain, the self-declared king of Riverstone High, was about to fight a girl. And not just any girl, Amara Johnson. Whispers moved like a current across the courtyard. Some came to see Chase humiliate her. Others were just there for a spectacle. And a few, the ones who had seen the cafeteria incident, came with quiet curiosity. Or guilt. The late afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the pavement. Amara stood still, centered, composed, her black hoodie tied around her waist, her curls pulled back tight. She wasn't hyped or angry. She was calm, but her eyes were locked in. Across from her, Chase bounced on his toes, cracking his neck, smirking. "You sure you still want to go through with this?" he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Amara didn't answer. She just raised her fists, her stance low, knees loose. She wasn't performing. She was ready. Chase took that as an invitation. He stepped in fast and heavy, throwing a right hook, classic football move, all strength, no technique. Amara saw it coming. One breath, one shift. She ducked low, clean, fluid. The punch sliced through the air, catching nothing. And before Chase could blink, her left fist swung up from her side. It landed with surgical precision just below his ribcage, right into the solar plexus. A hook from a fighter. Years of muscle memory condensed into a single devastating strike. Chase's body froze. His breath caught mid-throat. His chest heaved, then spasmed. He dropped to his knees, hands clutching his stomach, eyes wide with panic, mouth gaping like a fish pulled from water. The entire courtyard went silent. No laughter, no cheering. Just the echo of his knees hitting the ground and the slow, stunned realization that something seismic had just occurred. Amara didn't gloat, didn't move. She stood above him, breathing steady, eyes locked on his. Then she stepped closer. If I wanted, she said, her voice low enough for only him and the few in front to hear, you wouldn't be breathing right now. Chase looked up, sweat and shock pooling in his eyes. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Behind them, someone lowered their phone. The urge to record had evaporated into unease. Amara straightened her back and looked out across the crowd. No joy, no pride, only release. This wasn't revenge. It was emancipation. The version of herself she'd locked away, the fighter, the disciplined warrior her uncle had trained, had returned for a moment. And in that moment, she'd reminded herself who she really was. But even in victory, there was weight. She turned slowly and walked away, leaving Chase gasping, surrounded by silence. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her hands trembled not from exertion, but from the emotion welling inside her. She hadn't wanted to do this. She had tried to follow her mother's plea, to blend in, to stay invisible. But some places wouldn't let you disappear, especially if you were black, especially if you were strong, especially if you were both. As she passed through the crowd, eyes followed her, some wide with awe, others narrowed with confusion or fear. No one dared to stop her. She heard murmurs. Did you see what she did? She dropped him. She didn't even flinch. But what they didn't see, what no one could see, was the storm inside her. That blow, as precise as it was powerful, had changed more than just Chase's posture. It had shifted the balance. It had broken the unspoken rule that the new girl had to submit, had to smile, had to shrink herself to fit in. And worse, for those who upheld that rule, it had proven that she was capable, not just of defending herself, but of commanding respect. The label would follow. Not strong, not skilled, but angry, dangerous, problematic. Because when a black girl stands tall, especially after being knocked down again and again, the world often mistakes it for aggression. They don't see discipline, or boundaries, or control. They see threat. And Amara knew it. That realization hit harder than her fist ever could. By the time she reached the edge of the courtyard, her fists finally unclenched. She looked at the faint traces of blood where her fingernails had pressed into her palms. A quiet reminder this wasn't a victory without cost. She leaned against the side wall of the building, out of sight, out of breath. Not from the fight, but from the ripple she had just sent through Riverstone High. The ripple that would become a wave. She pulled out her phone. One new message from her uncle. Heard from your mom. Hope you're doing okay. Remember, strength is knowing when to fight and when not to. She didn't respond. Not yet. Because today she hadn't fought out of pride or anger. She'd fought for the right to be treated like a human being. And she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Of whispers turning to rumors. Of stares turning into judgments. But maybe, just maybe, it was also the start of a conversation. One that Riverstone had avoided for too long. And one that a girl like Amara was no longer willing to walk away from. It was a Friday afternoon when everything changed again. The school week had crawled to a close, and the late autumn sky hovered low and gray, casting a pale hue over the sidewalks of Riverstone. Amara stood quietly at the town's old bus stop near Maple and 3rd Backpack, slung over one shoulder, earbuds in hoodie zipped to the top. The pavement was cracked, the shelter rusted at the seams, forgotten like a lot of things in this part of town. A group of younger girls stood nearby, freshmen, probably giggling, sharing snacks, and flipping through a shared phone screen. Harmless, until 5 boys pulled up in a dented sedan, music thumping like a threat. They weren't from Riverstone High. Amara didn't recognize a single face. They climbed out slow, swaggering. One wore a Letterman jacket from Cross Hill Prep, the rival school a few towns over. Another lit a cigarette like it was some kind of performance. Then came the words, "Hey ladies, waiting for daddy to pick you up," one of them jeered. Laughter. Or maybe you're waiting for someone with real muscles, another added, flexing his biceps like a cartoon. The girls shrank back instinctively, their laughter disappearing. One of them, tall, with dark braids, stepped in front of the others. "Leave us alone," she said, voice small but defiant. Wrong move. One of the boys reached out, fingers brushing her arm. "You got an attitude?" He grinned. That was the moment Amara pulled her earbuds out. She didn't need time to process. Her breath slowed, her eyes narrowed, her body moved. 1 step, 2, 3. She cut across the sidewalk like a shadow with a mission. "Back off," she said. The boys turned amused. Letterman Jacket sneered. "And who the hell are you?" Their babysitter, Amara, didn't answer. She was already inside her stance. They didn't see it coming. The first blow landed on the one with the cigarette straight across the jaw. His head snapped sideways and his knees buckled before he could even exhale the smoke. The second swung a punch. Amara ducked and drove her elbow up into his sternum. He wheezed and collapsed over his knees. The third lunged at her. She stepped aside and used his momentum to flip him onto the ground. The fourth tried to grab her arm. Bad idea. She spun, pivoting on her heel, and slammed her knee into his thigh, sending him sprawling. The last one, the loudest, Letterman Jacket froze. Amara walked right up to him. He raised his hands. We didn't mean anything." "You did," she said. "That's the problem." Then with one fluid movement, she kicked the heel of his shoe, dropping him backward into the grime of the sidewalk. 15 seconds. That's all it took. The girls stared in stunned silence. One clutched her phone but didn't even think to press record. Then one of them, the one with the braids, whispered, "You saved us." Amara's chest heaved not from exhaustion, but from something deeper, a kind of adrenaline mixed with rage and relief. For a moment, she just stood there, looking down at the boys, some groaning, some scrambling to their feet and stumbling into their car. They drove off without another word, tailpipe coughing smoke into the cold air. Only then did Amara turn to the girls. "You okay?" she asked. They nodded, slowly, gratefully. "Thank you," another said. Nobody ever steps in like that." Amara exhaled hard, her shoulders relaxed. This wasn't like the fight with Chase. This wasn't about pride or proving anything. This was instinct. It was right. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The next day, the town exploded with whispers. She dropped 5 dudes in seconds. "Did you hear what she did at the bus stop? They were messing with freshmen. She shut it down like a pro." Teachers heard. Parents heard. Even the principal heard. But this time, something felt different. No one dared to call her aggressive, because this time she'd defended others. And the girls she'd protected, they talked. Loudly, proudly. She's not dangerous, they told anyone who'd listen. She's brave. And it started a ripple. In locker rooms, at lunch tables, after school. Girls started asking questions. Where can I learn to defend myself? Is there a gym around here that teaches self-defense? Maybe Amara could show us. Because the truth hit hard, most girls were never taught how to fight. They were taught how to avoid danger, to be polite, to shrink. But seeing Amara stand tall, clean, focused, unapologetic, ignited something. It gave them permission to believe they didn't have to just survive. They could resist. They could protect each other. Amara sat alone at lunch that Monday, earbuds in tray, untouched. Then the girl with braids slid into the seat across from her. "You don't have to sit alone, you know." Amara looked up. "You sure?" The girl smiled. "After what you did, you're the reason we even feel safe enough to eat lunch." Amara didn't smile, but her eyes softened. For the first time in Riverstone, she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt like a force, not feared, respected. And with that came responsibility. She had shown them strength, but not cruelty, power, but with control. She knew what the headlines would say if things went wrong. Black girl attacks 5 boys. But she didn't care anymore, because she also knew what those girls would remember. That someone stood up, that someone didn't look away, that someone chose to fight when no one else would. And maybe that someone could be them too. 15 seconds. That's all it took to change their world. And now it was only just beginning. The courtroom was colder than Amara expected, not in temperature, but in silence, in the way the white walls seemed to glare down at her like a jury of their own. The wooden bench creaked as she sat beside her attorney, hands folded tightly in her lap. She wasn't shackled, wasn't cuffed. This wasn't a criminal trial, not officially, but it sure felt like one. Across the aisle sat Chase Weller and his father, Martin Weller, still dressed like a man who owned the world. Dark gray suit, slicked back hair, a smugness that didn't waver even under the fluorescent lights. Chase wore a sling on his arm, though Amara knew the injury had healed weeks ago. Cosmetic, dramatic, strategic. The courtroom buzzed with whispers and shifting eyes. In the gallery, half the seats were filled with reporters, some from local outlets, others with national badges pinned to their collars. 2 headlines had already begun circling the internet. Teenage girl assaults popular athlete at school, claims self-defense. High school hero, the girl who stood up to bullies and got sued for it. The truth has always hung somewhere in between. Judge Whitman, a gray-haired man in his 60s, finally entered. The bailiff called for order. Everyone rose, then sat. And it began. The plaintiff's attorney, Mr. Kent, stood first. Polished, confident, his words clipped and clean. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this is not about race. It's not about gender. This is about violence. An unprovoked attack on a young man who posed no threat by someone trained to hurt." He turned toward the jury. "Miss Johnson is not just a student. She is a trained fighter, a former champion in youth MMA. With that comes responsibility and restraint. But instead, she chose violence." He paused, let the words hang. "She humiliated my client, injured him, and now seeks to justify it with a story." Whispers stirred. A few camera shutters clicked. Then it was Amara's turn. She rose slowly, her lawyer giving a nod. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the tile as she approached the stand. No tears, no nerves, just stillness. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and took her seat. "State your name for the record," the judge said. "Amara Johnson." "Go ahead," her attorney prompted. Amara took a breath. Then another. "My name is Amara Johnson. I'm 16. I transferred to Riverstone High a few months ago from Baltimore." She looked toward the jury not as a performer, but as someone tired of pretending. "I didn't go there to fight. I went there to stay quiet. My mom made me promise to leave my past behind to focus on school, to fit in." A pause. "But it didn't matter how quiet I was. From the first week, Chase Weller made sure everyone knew I didn't belong." A murmur from the Weller side. The judge lifted his hand. "Let her speak." Amara continued. "He charged me $10 a day just to sit in the cafeteria without being bothered. He poured food on my head in front of teachers who looked away. He humiliated me over and over." She swallowed, and I said nothing. I walked away. But that wasn't enough. She shifted slightly. "Until the day I stood up to him." Her lawyer stepped in. "Did you provoke the fight?" "No," she answered. "I challenged him, yes. After he embarrassed me in front of the whole school again, I told him if he won, I'd back off. If I won, he had to apologize. He agreed. He threw the first punch. And what happened then, I dodged. Hit him once. He fell. I didn't touch him after that. And what did you say? I told him if I wanted to hurt him, he'd be in the hospital. But I didn't want that." Silence. The prosecutor rose. "Miss Johnson, are you aware that your punch resulted in a shoulder dislocation and mild concussion?" "Yes." "And you don't regret that Amara held his gaze?" "I regret that it had to happen. I don't regret defending myself." The prosecutor smiled coldly. "You're proud of being violent then?" "No," Amara said, voice steady. "I'm proud of not being silent." Gasps. The room shifted. Journalists began scribbling. The judge blinked slowly. "Do you have anything else to add, Miss Johnson?" She nodded. "I know what I look like to some of you. Black, strong, trained. I know how that scares people." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the witness stand. "But I also know what Chase did. And I know what would have happened if I hadn't said enough. And if this courtroom wants to call that aggression, fine. But I call it survival. A beat. I'm not here to play the victim. I'm here to tell the truth." No one moved. The judge cleared his throat. Court adjourned for the day. Outside, the press surged like a wave. Microphones stretched over shoulders. Flashes lit the courthouse steps. "Amara, do you have anything to say to your supporters, Amara? Do you see yourself as a role model? Do you think race played a part in this case?" She didn't answer, but across the crowd she saw them. The girls from the bus stop, the students from Riverstone, even her mom. And they weren't clapping. They were just watching, like they really saw her for the first time. Not as a fighter, not as a threat, but as a girl who stood up when no one else would. Inside, the jury deliberated, but for Amara, the verdict had already arrived. She had spoken, and the world had listened. The gymnasium was buzzing louder than any Friday night football game Riverstone High had ever hosted. But this wasn't about sports. This was about something bigger. Mats were lined neatly across the polished wood floor. The school's usually forgotten self-defense room, once used only for storage, had been transformed into a sanctuary of strength. Not strength defined by who could shout the loudest or throw the hardest punch, but by who had the courage to show up. And they did. Dozens of them. Girls in hoodies and sneakers. Girls with fear still lingering in their eyes. Girls who for too long had been told to stay quiet, don't fight back. Or worst of all, it's not that serious. Amara stood at the front, dressed in black sweats and a navy blue shirt with the words "Own Your Power" printed across the chest. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Okay, she said calmly. Before we start, I want you to know this isn't about becoming a fighter. This is about becoming someone who never has to feel helpless again. Her voice was steady, her stance grounded. I'm not here to make you someone else. I'm here to help you find the strength you've had all along. She glanced across the room at freshmen with books still in their arms, at juniors clutching their wrists, unsure whether they belonged. And you do belong. All of you. They believed her, because she had been one of them. Just months ago, Amara had been the new girl, the girl who ate lunch alone, the girl covered in sauce in front of hundreds, the girl they said should have just stayed quiet. But now she was their leader. The idea had come to her in the quiet days after the trial, when the headlines started shifting, when the hallway whispers went from judgment to admiration, when younger girls began leaving her handwritten notes in her locker. Thank you for standing up. I wish I was brave like you. Can you teach me? She didn't just want to defend herself anymore. She wanted to teach others how to rise. And so she had gone to Principal Mayer's office with a printed proposal and steady eyes. He read it twice, asked one question, and signed it. You earned this, Amara. Word spread fast. By the end of the first week, her workshop had over 30 signups. By the end of the second, the gym was full. And then came the news that caught her off guard. The mayor of Crest Hill, Teresa Wynn, a black woman who'd led the city for over a decade, requested a meeting. When Amara walked into the city building in her Converse and a denim jacket, she expected a photo op. Instead, she was ushered into a small conference room where Mayor Wynn waited, not with cameras, but with sincerity. I've been watching what you're doing, she said, and not just the punches. The way you've turned pain into purpose. She handed Amara a small box. Inside was a bronze medallion. The inscription read, Civic Dedication, Courage Beyond Fear. You're the youngest person to ever receive this. Mayor Wynn said, her eyes glinting. But I have a feeling you won't be the last. Amara blinked, then smiled, not with pride, but with clarity. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was the beginning of a new mission. Back at school, the energy had changed. Even the boys who once scoffed at her now offered respectful nods, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Amara hadn't beaten Chase to become feared. She had chosen not to destroy him when she could, and that restraint that power held back had made people rethink what strength looked like. More importantly, it made them rethink what leadership could look like. Amara didn't lecture. She listened. She didn't shame. She guided. And in doing so, she did something no punch ever could. She made others feel seen, safe, strong. One Thursday afternoon, as the self-defense class wrapped up, a shy sophomore named Layla approached her. Miss Johnson, Amara chuckled. You can just call me Amara. Layla blushed. Right. I wanted to say I used to skip gym because I hated being touched. Even high fives freaked me out. She hesitated, then added, Today I blocked a grab. I didn't freeze. Amara's chest swelled, not with ego, but with something deeper. Purpose. You did that, she said softly. You showed up. You stayed. Layla grinned. Thanks for showing me how. That night, Amara sat in her room, the medallion on her desk, the newspaper clipping taped to her wall. It read, From Victim to Vanguard, How One Student Changed Riverstone High. But she didn't care about articles, or medals, or even approval. She cared about one thing, that somewhere another girl would see what she'd done and know she could do it too. Because strength wasn't just fists or trophies. It was showing up. It was speaking out. It was standing tall when everything told you to sit down. And now, Amara wasn't just standing. She was leading. The graduation stage was modest folding chairs, creaky wood, and a banner that read, Riverstone High, Class of 2025. But for Amara Johnson, it felt like a mountaintop. She stood near the back of the line, her cap tilted slightly to the left, the tassel brushing against her temple with every breeze. Her gown fit snug over her shoulders, black with a gold honor sash. Her hands stayed calm, clasped gently at her waist, though her heart beat with the quiet thrum of reflection. Amara Johnson, the principal's voice called out. As she stepped forward, applause erupted, not just polite claps, but a swell of sound from students' parents and teachers alike. The cheers weren't just for her grades or her speeches. They were for everything she had stood for. Everything she had endured. When she crossed the stage, the mayor was there again, this time in the front row. So was Principal Mayer, who rose to his feet without hesitation, and behind them in the last row of the bleachers stood a line of younger girls from her self-defense program, arms linked beaming. Amara lifted her diploma, not above her head, just chest level, close to her heart. It wasn't a declaration. It was a quiet promise. Later that night, after the music had faded and the gym lights had dimmed, Amara sat in her room, now half-empty boxes taped and labeled. Her duffel bag lay open beside the closet. Her acceptance letter from Howard University sat on the nightstand. Psychology, sports focus. It wasn't the easiest choice. She could have gone into criminal justice, could have gone straight to training full-time, but she knew where her impact would be deeper. Helping young athletes, especially girls, understand their minds, their worth, and their rights to take up space. She thought back to the early days, her uncle's relentless drills, her mother's tired eyes, that cafeteria, that courtroom. Every bruise, every tear, every decision to not lash out harder than she could. It had all shaped her. And now she would shape others. 2 years later, the doors opened, not to a gym, not to a dojo, but to the Phoenix Center. A modest, sunlit space tucked on the east side of Crest Hill, with padded floors, quiet therapy rooms, and a mural that ran the length of the hallway. The mural showed silhouettes of girls rising, punching, shielding, standing shoulder to shoulder. At the center, in bolder tones, a figure with braided hair gloves at her side, and one hand extended behind her, reaching back, bringing the next girl forward. Underneath it, the inscription, "Strength is not what you take, it's what you give." Amara taught classes twice a week. The rest of her time, she coached small groups, spoke at local high schools, and volunteered with trauma therapists helping teens process violence and abuse. She didn't chase media, but the media found her. And every time they did, she redirected the spotlight not to herself, but to the girls walking out of her center with lifted chins and newly learned footwork. One morning, she received a call from Riverstone High. Principal Mayer. His voice still carried the same rasp, but there was warmth in it. "We're updating our Hall of Honor," he said. "We'd like to include you." Amara paused. "I'm not sure I belong there." "You're the reason it exists," he said gently. "Come see." When she walked into the school a week later, nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The lockers were the same pale blue. The hallway still smelled faintly of floor wax and mystery meat. But students, especially the younger ones, recognized her. A few waved. A few whispered. One girl even ran up and asked, "Are you that Amara?" She just smiled. At the end of the hallway outside the new student center was a framed photograph. Her. Mid-kick, frozen in motion, not during a fight, but in one of her workshops helping a small child hold a blocking stance. Beneath it, a simple plaque, "Amara Johnson." She taught us that true power is found in protecting others. She stared at it for a long time, then took one step back and breathed. Not because she needed recognition, but because for the first time she felt at peace with what she'd left behind and ready for what lay ahead. As the sun set behind the high school that had once tried to shrink her, Amara stepped outside her shadow, long across the parking lot. She checked her phone, 2 new messages. One was from Layla, now a junior leading her own self-defense group at a middle school. The other was from a woman in Texas who'd read an article about the Phoenix Center and wanted to start one just like it. Amara smiled. No fanfare, no trophies, just steady ripples. Ripples that turned into waves. Because as the world kept asking who gets to be strong, Amara had already answered anyone, especially those who refuse to turn away when injustice knocks, especially those who choose purpose over pride, and especially those who understand that a legacy isn't about how loud you are, it's about how many people rise because of you. The story of Amara may have ended here, but its echoes live on in every girl who dares to lift her chin, in every young soul who chooses to stand up rather than stay silent. It reminds us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply means staying true to who you are, even when the world tells you to be someone else. That choosing kindness over cruelty, courage over fear, and community over silence is the quiet revolution that changes everything. What about you? Have you ever been in a moment where standing up for yourself or someone else felt like the hardest thing to do? What gave you the strength to keep going? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if this journey with Amara moved, you consider sharing it with someone who could use a little strength right now. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because together we're building a community where courage is celebrated and voices like yours truly matter. Thank you for walking this road with us. We're grateful you're here.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.